I'm Dalton Johnson, and welcome to episode 5 of Warriors Weekly, where we talk about the week that was for the Warriors and the week that's going to be for the Warriors. So let's start off with the week that was. The start was great, about as good as you could hope for the Warriors, facing a back-to-back, first beating the Memphis Grizzlies on Game 1 and then beating the Los Angeles Clippers in Game 2 with just different ways of going about those wins. So let's talk about the first win against the Grizzlies, where the Warriors, they were led by the young guys. That's exactly what you want on the first night of a back-to-back to preserve energy, to preserve minutes for the veterans that are going to play on night 2. Game 1 against the Grizzlies was the first time ever that Jonathan Kuminga, Brandon Podziemski, and Moses Moody all scored at least 20 points. It was only the 6th time in Steph Curry's career with the Warriors that 4 or more players have scored 20 points in a game that he played, and he wasn't one of them. The 4th in that win was Jimmy Butler. So that's the kind of balance that the Warriors are going to be looking for to withstand an 82-game grind between their veterans that are 35 and older and their young players as well. And then the next night, the Clippers come to town. The Warriors, they started to look a little fatigued in that second quarter on the second night of a back-to-back. James Harden was going off in the first half, scored 20 points in that first half, but he had to work for his 20 points with Jonathan Kuminga guarding him. You know, he was, I believe, 7 for 7 at the free throw line in the first half. And then in the second half, the Warriors, their elite D that we saw after the Jimmy Butler trade last season, it showed up against the Clippers, where in the second half, the Warriors outscored them 52-30. They went on a 32 to, I believe, 14 advantage in the third quarter. An 18-point lead for the Warriors in that third quarter, outscored them by 22 points in the second half, where James Harden was held scoreless in the second half by the Warriors. So just the two different ways that you get to see how the Warriors can win, how they can be such a dangerous team. And that had me through the first 5 games saying, hey, the Warriors, they've made a statement already. They've shown the rest of the league that their veteran stars are playing like veteran stars, that their young guys have caught up, and that they're able to help them as well, that we're seeing when they can have an elite defense as well. But then we had these last 2 losses, a loss to the Milwaukee Bucks and a loss to the Indiana Pacers. And now the Warriors, it just seems like the good momentum has really kind of deflated. You know, that balloon was popped with these 2 losses. And it's because of who they were going against. They were going against a Milwaukee Bucks team that an hour before tip-off, they found out that Giannis Antetokounmpo was not going to be able to play. He was probable all day with a little bit of a calf issue, went through warm-ups, and next thing you know, he's not playing. But next thing you know also, the Warriors, they had a total letdown loss without Giannis. They let their former second-round draft pick Ryan Rollins have the game of his life against the Warriors, went off for 32 points. And after the game, Steve Kerr, he alluded to both mental and physical fatigue against the Bucks. Kind of joked that the Warriors are 0-12 when teams sit their stars in the last few years. And that does feel true, honestly. And it did feel like a game where, okay, no Giannis, and the veterans just couldn't get up to it. But then against the Pacers, there was no excuse. They weren't sitting their stars, technically. They were just without their stars. We already know that Tyrese Halliburton's going to miss the entire season with that torn Achilles that he suffered in Game 7 of the NBA Finals. But then on top of that, the Pacers were without 4 more key players, with no Andrew Nembhard, no Obi Toppin, no Benedict Mathurin, no TJ McConnell, and no problems for the Pacers. You knew that it was going to have to be the Pascal Siakam and Aaron Nesmith show for the Pacers, and at the beginning of the game, it was all Siakam. He was their entire offense. He was completely dominating the Warriors' makeshift zone, and Aaron Nesmith got going too, where he scored 31 points and made 5 3-pointers, came into the game averaging only 11 points per game, goes off for a career-high 31. But then it's Quentin Jackson, just like Ryan Rollins in the previous game, a guy that kind of came out of nowhere, and Quentin Jackson, who was a two-way player, 27-year-old two-way player, who if the Indiana Pacers were healthier, he'd be getting ready for the start of the G League season right now. But instead, he goes out, he scores 25 points, obviously career high, 10 assists, also a career high, with 0 turnovers, all while guarding Steph Curry, who just had an off night, like to say the least. Steph just wasn't good. He had 24 points, but he was 8 of 23 shooting, 4 of 16 from three-point range. He was a minus 21. The Warriors, they were better without Steph Curry on the bench. They regained their lead in the third quarter because of bench players, because of role players like Brandon Pajemski, Guy Santos, and Moses Moody. So now, with those 2 losses, we have to move ahead to the week that's going to be, and you could hear the frustrations from Steph, from Steve Kerr, from Jimmy Butler, and that's a good thing. That's what I'm going to say right away. It's not like the Warriors were just going, hey, these kind of loss happens. What Steve Kerr came out and said was, like, these are the losses that can't happen, because at the end of the year, it comes down to, in this Western Conference, 1 or 2 or 3 games. 2 games last season took the Warriors, from being a play-in team compared to being a top 5 team in the West, or even having home court advantage and being a top 4 team. Went from 48 wins in the 7 seed to, if they had 50 wins, they would have been a top 5 seed. Like, that's the difference right now, and that's why you can't lose these types of games. That's why I'm expecting, starting Tuesday night, a bounce back from the Warriors, from Steph Curry. They play the Phoenix Suns. It's the first night of a back-to-back where the Warriors, they host the Phoenix Suns, and then they just go up the road and they play the Kings the next night. These are 2 teams that the Warriors are quote-unquote supposed to win. We saw that they were supposed to win against the Bucks, that they were supposed to win against the Pacers. They didn't win either of those games. The previous loss was against the Blazers on the second night of a back-to-back, where they had to board a flight to Portland after an overtime win against the Nuggets at home. That loss was understandable. That was a scheduled loss to the definition. The losses against the Bucks and the Pacers, no excuses. Sure, Steve could use mental and physical fatigue against the Bucks, but there's a reason that he didn't even let any of his words be construed for an excuse against the Pacers. So now this week, with the back-to-back against the Suns, against the Kings, and then you're going to board a flight, go to Denver, which is never easy to play in the Mile High City, against a true title contender. The Nuggets will, of course, be looking for revenge against the Warriors after that loss that they had at Chase Center. And then soon after that, over the weekend, the Warriors will be looking for their own revenge against the Pacers. It's another busy 4-game week for the Warriors. They need to take care of business, and they need to take care of the simple things. The turnovers are piling up. You're seeing these scoring droughts where teams are going on extended runs, whether they're 12-0 runs, whether it's a 20-5 run that the Pacers went on at the end of the game to beat the Warriors in Indiana. The 12-0 run that I mentioned in the third quarter, where the Bucks, they stole the Warriors' previous third quarter mojo. They just can't be having these droughts where stretches are snowballing into losses. So I'm going to be looking for that. I'm going to be looking for the turnovers to really dwindle down, and for this team to just play smarter basketball, to set an aggressive but smart tone early in the game against the Phoenix Suns, against the Sacramento Kings on a back-to-back. But 2 other things that I'm going to be looking for is, Steve Kerr mentioned after the Milwaukee loss, I believe it was the spacing. And right now, you're seeing 3-point shooting from Jimmy Butler, from Jonathan Kuminga, from Draymond Green, and then Steph Curry's at about 38-39%. But Jimmy Butler's numbers from 3, they're going to come down from 50%. Jonathan Kuminga is not going to shoot 45-42% from 3 the entire season, most likely. Draymond Green, most likely, is not going to shoot 40% from 3-point range the entire season. That's why I'm going to be looking at 2 players in particular. I might even add a third here. The first 2 that I'm looking at are Buddy Hield and Al Horford. They have to provide more of a scoring punch off the bench. Al Horford, I know that this is somewhat new for him, where just like in Boston, actually, he's not going to play back-to-backs. But Al Horford is solely a bench player for the Warriors, trying to preserve his minutes for the best and most important times in the game, where he's playing around right now 21 minutes per game. And yeah, you're still seeing the smarts out of Al Horford, the high IQ. He's rebounding at a high rate. But the three-point shot is just not there. And it isn't for Buddy Hield either. They are providing, on certain nights, just nothing off the bench offensively. And they need to, in the very least, hit those open three-pointers because Al Horford, he's missing open ones. Buddy Hield, you need him to continue to take them because he is such a rhythm shooter and he's such a threat from long distance that you have to keep the defense honest and get him going. And then there's Quentin Post, who's going to start on certain nights where they flip either Brandon Podziemski or Quentin Post for that fifth starter spot. Well, Quentin Post, yeah, he's a 7-footer, and he had that strong game in the Clippers win against Ivica Zubac by grabbing 8 rebounds and having probably the best defensive game in his young career. But he is not giving them the three-point threat that he was last season, where he shot over 40% as a 7-footer from three-point range. That three-point shot has got to get going from Buddy Hield, from Al Horford, and from Quentin Post, whether they're off the bench or in the starting lineup. This is a 4-game week where the Warriors can regain momentum, where they can correct bad habits, and get back on track in a hurry because the Western Conference is so loaded. And then after this week is where they get back on the road for their longest road trip thus far of the season, starting off with games in Oklahoma City and the San Antonio Spurs, where the OKC Thunder, the reigning champions, are the last undefeated team in the NBA. And the San Antonio Spurs, they just suffered their first loss of the season against a team that the Warriors are facing Tuesday night, the Phoenix Suns at Chase Center. A lot to learn from last week, especially with those 2 tough losses. And now the Warriors, they need to carry over and find some momentum starting back at Chase Center against the Phoenix Suns on Tuesday night.